Devin Gaines wasn't even on the math team. But when 5 top students failed the Olympiad, he walked on stage and solved every problem cold. The janitor's son. No tutors. No prep. Just brilliance they never wanted to see. The crowd didn't cheer. They froze. Then the principal leaned in and whispered 5 chilling words. This can't be allowed. What happened next? You won't believe what they tried to erase. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The night everyone expected to celebrate turned into a public collapse of academic royalty. The gymnasium of Rutherford High had never looked more polished. Bright overhead lights washed the polished wooden floor with a golden sheen, while rows of navy blue folding chairs held a crowd dressed for celebration rather than suspense. Teachers stood in clusters, straightening their lanyard. Parents whispered about college prospects and scholarship expectations. Banners printed with the names of the school's top-performing students hung proudly from the rafters. For weeks, posters around the school had advertised the annual Rutherford Math Olympiad, showcasing the smiling faces of 5 students who were considered academic royalty within the school. Jacob Thorne, Kylie Harrington, Trent Wells, Madison Clark, and Hunter Reed. All of them came from well-off white families, enrolled in advanced prep courses since elementary school, attending summer programs that cost more than some families earned in months. No one questioned why only these 5 ever made it to the finals. It was tradition. It was just how things worked. The crowd murmured with excitement, already anticipating perfect scores. Several parents clutched bouquets, convinced they'd be handing them to their perfect children within minutes. Even the principal, Daniel Givens, appeared unusually relaxed, his smile already rehearsed for the congratulatory photos. But in the far back corner by the exit doors sat Devin Gaines, a quiet 16-year-old with a slim frame, dark skin, and eyes that always seemed to be studying something no one else noticed. He kept to himself, partly by nature, partly by necessity. His clothes were plain, faded jeans, a stretched-out sweatshirt, and he carried a library book on advanced algebra, its spine cracked from overuse. Across the room, mopping up a corner spill near the vending machine, was Ellis Gaines, Devin's father, wearing his gray custodian uniform, sleeves slightly rolled. He was used to blending into the background, used to people avoiding eye contact. But tonight, as he glanced toward his son sitting alone, he felt something different, pride mixed with an unease he couldn't name. The Olympiad scoring had taken longer than usual. Teachers whispered anxiously as the judges huddled over printouts and red-marked grading sheets. One judge wiped his glasses 3 times before finally nodding gravely. Then came the moment. Principal Givens approached the microphone, tapping it twice. The speakers squealed softly. The audience settled into anticipatory silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his smile fixed in place. "The results for this year's Math Olympiad have been finalized, and before I announce them, I want to say how proud we are of our students' dedication." A judge leaned toward him, whispering something urgently. Givens' face twitched. He swallowed, and with that he continued, voice slightly less smooth. "Let's proceed." The large screen behind him flickered, then displayed a table of scores. At first the crowd didn't understand. Then the confusion spread like a slow-moving wave. Jacob fail. Kylie fail. Trent fail. Madison Hunter fail. Total perfect scores 0. Total passing scores 0. A mother gasped loudly, covering her mouth. Madison's father stood up, shouting, "This has to be a technical error." Hunter's mother fumbled with her phone, already dialing someone. One of the judges pinched the bridge of his nose, as though bracing for impact. The auditorium dissolved into chaos. "This is impossible. They studied all year. What kind of mistake is this?" Principal Givens raised both hands. "Everyone please calm down. I'm sure there's an explanation." But his voice was drowned out. Ellis paused mid-sweep, brow tightening. He glanced toward Devin, who still sat quietly, eyes scanning the board of results with the same calm he showed while studying complex proofs in dusty staff lounges. A few students looked back at Devin, puzzled. He wasn't supposed to be part of this night. He wasn't on the math team. He wasn't on any academic team. Some of them didn't even know his name. But Devin knew something they didn't. He had solved those Olympiad questions the moment they appeared on the big screen earlier. Not as a competitor. Not for recognition. Just because numbers made sense to him in a way people often didn't. The confusion at the front of the gym grew thicker, more frantic. One of the parents marched toward the judge's table, demanding to see the answer sheets. Another shouted at a teacher for incompetence. The math coach stood pale and trembling, clutching a stack of papers he didn't dare reveal. Then, through all the noise, Devin stood. Not abruptly, not dramatically, simply, slowly, like someone accepting a truth he had no intention of hiding anymore. Ellis noticed immediately. His hand tightened around the mop handle. "Devin," he whispered under his breath, fear sliding under his ribs. But Devin didn't hear him. His feet were already carrying him away from the exit row, step by steady step, into the ocean of angry parents and bewildered faculty. No one saw him at first. He was a shadow among louder shadows. But when he reached the center aisle, someone whispered, "Isn't that the janitor's son?" Another muttered, "What's he doing here?" And then Principal Givens saw him. The expression that crossed his face wasn't confusion, it was fear. The same fear of someone who had spent years building a wall, only to see a crack form where he least expected it. Devin kept walking, eyes steady on the judge's table. A teacher stepped back to avoid brushing against him, as though intelligence could rub off like dirt. 3 parents stared openly. One of the elite students, Jacob, glared at him, face red with humiliation and anger, as if Devin's existence somehow deepened his failure. At the front, the judges turned, noticing the approaching student. Judge Marianne Vickers narrowed her eyes, not in hostility, but curiosity. "Who is he?" another judge whispered. Devin didn't speed up. He didn't hesitate. He simply reached the front row, then stepped into the open space near the projector, the glowing screen, casting a faint halo against his skin. Ellis's voice trembled as he tried again. "Devin, son, don't." But the gym was too loud for one father's warning to reach its target. The murmurs rose. "What's he doing? Is he lost? Is he allowed up there?" Principal Givens moved quickly toward him, intercepting him just a few feet from the stage. He forced a smile that didn't match his eyes. "Hey there," he said quietly, through clenched teeth. "You shouldn't be up here. Please return to your seat." Devin looked up at him, calm as still water. "I want to look at the questions," he said. Givens blinked. "This isn't the time." "I think there's a mistake," Devin added softly. "I solved them earlier. I can show you." Givens' face stiffened. Around them, the crowd fell into a hush so complete it felt as though the air itself was listening. "You solved them," the principal repeated, tone edged with disbelief. A nearby parent scoffed. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous." Another hissed, "Get him off the floor." Judge Vickers leaned forward, now staring at Devin with sharp interest. "Let him speak," she called out from the table. Her voice silenced the room more effectively than any principal ever had. Givens swallowed, turning slightly toward the judges. His mask of authority slipped for half a second, revealing the panic beneath. Devin stepped forward again, and in that exact moment, Principal Givens' face twitched, not from annoyance, but from something far more telling. He flinched. A tiny, sharp movement, as though Devin Gaines was a threat, as though the truth he carried was more dangerous than any outburst happening around them. And the entire gym, though they didn't yet understand why, felt the shift. The moment the janitor's son walked toward the stage, the principal flinched. The moment he walked toward the stage, the principal flinched. When a forgotten student dares to rise, an entire school holds its breath. For a moment, the gym felt like it had stopped breathing. The air grew thick, heavy, as if it understood the weight of what was happening before the people did. Devin Gaines, a boy the school rarely noticed, continued his quiet advance toward the front of the room. His shoes barely made a sound on the polished floor, but somehow every step echoed like a challenge. Principal Givens shifted again, the discomfort visible despite his attempt at composure. He cleared his throat and stepped directly into Devin's path. "Young man," he said, voice too tight to be genuinely calm, "you're not authorized to be up here. Please return to your seat." Devin looked at him, not confrontational, not afraid, simply steady. "I want to look at the questions," he said softly. A few parents muttered irritably, "He's wasting time. What is this circus? Why is the janitor's boy on the floor?" Givens forced a smile that felt like a locked door. "This isn't appropriate, Devin. There are rules." "I solved them," Devin replied, still quiet, still steady. Earlier, when they were shown on the screen, the reaction was immediate. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd. One mother scoffed, clutching her pearls. "He solved Olympiad questions? Are we just letting anyone claim brilliance now?" A group of students snorted. Someone whispered loudly, "Yeah, right. He probably thinks he did." But Judge Marianne Vickers, seated with arms crossed and expression sharp, leaned forward. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice slicing cleanly through the noise. Devin turned his head toward her. "I solved them earlier," he repeated. "I can show you." The gym fell into a heavy hush. Even the buzzing of the overhead lights seemed to dim. Judge Vickers exchanged a quick glance with the other judges. Her voice carried authority, calm, unfazed, but unmistakably firm. "Let him try." Gasps erupted. Principal Givens stiffened. "Marianne," he said through clenched teeth, "this is highly irregular." She didn't look at him. "So is 5 top-ranked students failing an exam designed for them," she replied. Then to Devin, "Go ahead." The markers on the podium. The crowd shifted, uneasy. Some outraged, some intrigued, many confused. Devin stepped past Principal Givens, who stood frozen for a beat, jaw clenched before he finally moved aside. Devin climbed onto the small stage and walked to the whiteboard set up for demonstration. The bright lights washed over him, exposing the quiet confidence etched into his expression. He paused just long enough to push his sleeves up, and then he picked up the marker. The first equation appeared on the projection screen again. A problem so complex that even the elite students had required half an hour to attempt it. Devin took one brief look at it, only a glance, like someone glancing at a familiar street sign, and began writing. His handwriting wasn't polished. It curved and angled unpredictably, but beneath that unpolished exterior was a mind moving with precision. His marker slid across the board quickly, confidently. A few parents leaned forward involuntarily. "A math teacher," Mr. Calloway whispered. "Is he deriving that from memory?" Devin murmured softly to himself, not for attention but for clarity. The error was in the initial substitution. They overcomplicated it. He didn't turn around, didn't seek approval. He simply kept writing. His steps across the board were fluid, almost rhythmic. He worked through the multi-part problem with a pace that suggested deep understanding rather than memorization. When he reached the end, he stepped aside. Gasps, low murmurs, blinking eyes. The answer was correct. Not just correct, elegant, efficient, almost beautiful in its simplicity. Someone in the audience whispered, "No way, no way he just did that." Judge Vickers spoke first. "Show the second problem." The screen shifted. Without being asked, Devin raised the marker again. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stall. He read the question once, nodded slightly, and began again. This time, whispers filled the room. Students leaned closer, recognizing steps they themselves had fumbled. Parents exchanged worried glances. Kylie Harrington's mother muttered harshly under her breath, "This is humiliating." Her son sat frozen, face pale, staring at Devin with a mix of confusion and wounded pride. Principal Givens pressed his hands together tightly, the smile long gone from his face. He looked like someone watching a structure he built begin to crack. Piece by piece, Devin finished the second problem, then the third. By the time he reached the fourth, the gym was dead silent. He didn't rush. He didn't stumble. His breathing remained even and steady. The boy who never raised his hand in class, never spoke above a whisper, stood under bright lights, solving problems meant for the school's elite. Every step he took was a quiet rebellion. Every line he wrote was a challenge to the hierarchy that had kept him invisible. When he finished, he set the marker down gently, almost respectfully, and stepped back. Judge Vickers leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "That was flawless," she said almost to herself. One of the other judges shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't normal. Students don't solve like this unless—" A parent cut him off. "Unless what?" "Unless they cheat." All heads turned toward Devin. A wave of tension rippled through the room. Devin didn't speak. He didn't defend himself. He simply looked out over the audience with a stillness that made the accusation feel beneath him. Ellis, standing against the back wall with his mop, felt his chest tighten. Tears didn't form in his eyes. Ellis wasn't a man who cried easily, but pride rose up so sharply inside him that it almost hurt. He whispered softly, "That's my boy," though no one around him heard. Judge Vickers finally rose from her seat. She walked toward the board, scanning every step Devin had taken. Her fingers traced the air just above the ink. She nodded slowly, analyzing each transition, each line of logic. "This is advanced reasoning," she murmured. "Not guesswork, not mimicry. Another judge, an older man with silver hair, stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with audible force. It echoed. People jerked their heads toward him. He stared at Devon with wide eyes, astonishment, confusion, and something else no one could read. Then he asked the question that froze the entire room. "Where did you learn this?" One judge stood up in disbelief and asked, "Where did you learn this?" The boy they ignored had already solved the problems while scrubbing through silence. The question, "Where did you learn this?" hung in the air long after the judge's voice stopped echoing. It was not a gentle question. It was an interrogation disguised as awe, a disbelief wrapped in suspicion. The gym was so silent that even the soft hum of the projector felt loud. Devon stood under the spotlight, hands loosely at his sides, breathing steady but eyes flicking toward the back of the room where his father stood frozen. For a moment Devon seemed younger than 16, uncertain, exposed, but the hesitation vanished quickly, swallowed by the quiet dignity he had carried all his life. "I just learned," he said finally. It was such a simple answer that the crowd almost didn't know how to react. "Learned?" scoffed a parent. "From where? You don't just learn Olympiad math." "Someone must have helped him," another whispered sharply. Judge Vickers studied Devon closely, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. Devon seemed ready to say more, but his voice caught and he turned his gaze downward, stepping back from the board. The judges gathered briefly near the podium, whispering among themselves. A few students drifted closer, trying to overhear. Principal Givens, jaw stiff and eyes darting nervously between the judges and the crowd, seemed ready to intervene again. But Devon wasn't watching them anymore. His mind wasn't in the gym. It was traveling back to the quiet nights, the staff hallways, the echo of his father's mop bucket bumping against door frames, the green smell of cleaning supplies mixing with old wood and chalk dust. His real education began far away from any classroom. Devon remembered the first night he ever cared about math. He was 9. His father had come home late, shoulders aching, hands dry from cleaning chemicals. Ellis had dropped a torn algebra book on the kitchen table. With a tired chuckle,
"They were throwing it out," he said, rubbing his eyes.
"Figured maybe you could doodle in it." But Devon didn't doodle. He read it cover to cover in 2 days. Not because he understood everything. It was confusing, intimidating, messy, but because it felt like a secret written in a language he desperately wanted to learn. The next week he asked his father if he could bring home any more discarded books. "Math ones," he added shyly. "If there are any." Ellis didn't understand why, but he saw the light in his son's eyes, a rare glowing curiosity. And he made a promise to himself. If the world wasn't going to give Devon a chance, he would at least give him tools. So textbooks, ragged, outdated, scribbled in, became Devon's treasure. He read them everywhere, on the bus, during lunch breaks, sitting on milk crates, while his father emptied trash cans. He learned geometry from a 1998 workbook, with missing pages. Calculus from a book that smelled like mildew. Number theory from a community college handout someone had thrown away. But most importantly, he learned quietly, silently, invisible. At 12, he began spending evenings in the staff lounge. While Ellis cleaned classrooms, Devon would sit at a round table covered in scratches and coffee stains, using the free Wi-Fi that barely reached the corner. Teachers who walked in often mistook him for someone's sibling waiting to be picked up. Some ignored him completely. Others gave polite nods but never asked what he was working on. Devon didn't mind. He liked shadows. Shadows were safe, but shadows were also where he witnessed the world's truth. He heard teachers praising the same top students over and over. Heard them casually mention which families donated the most. Heard them discuss high-potential kids, a phrase that never included students who looked like him. Once he overheard 2 teachers whisper that the school couldn't waste resources on students who weren't built for higher-level academics. He remembered hiding his face in his notebook that day, pretending the sting didn't reach him. So he studied harder. Not for them, for himself. Back in the present, Devon could feel the weight of the gym's eyes on him. Judging, doubting, trying to make sense of something they couldn't accept. Judge Vickers stepped forward, looking directly at him. "Did someone teach you these advanced methods?" she asked carefully. "No," Devon said. I taught myself." Whispers erupted again. "Impossible. He's lying. Someone must have coached him." The sharpness of their voices cut deeper than any blade could. Devon clenched his fingers slightly, the only visible sign of tension. He didn't look angry, just resigned, as if he had already prepared himself for disbelief, for dismissal, for being reduced to something that didn't match what he had shown. Ellis stepped forward from the back, calling out softly, "He's telling the truth." His voice cracked just enough to betray emotion he usually hid. "He studies every night. I've seen him. I bring him books people throw out." Some parents winced at that discomfort, mixing with the realization that the janitor's son was outperforming children raised in privilege. Judge Vickers turned toward Ellis. "Is that true? He learned from discarded materials?" Ellis nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Everything he knows, he learned himself." For a moment, Devon's eyes met his father's. Ellis smiled, small but proud. Devon felt something warm in his chest, something grounding, like he wasn't standing alone on the stage anymore. But the warmth faded when Principal Givens stepped forward, clearing his throat loudly. "All right," he announced, waving a hand dismissively. "We've had our demonstration, but let's remain rational." His tone dipped into patronizing calm. "This proves nothing except that he memorized these problems in advance." The crowd murmured approvingly. Devon blinked, taken aback. "I didn't memorize." Givens raised a hand. "Son, please. It's okay. You don't have to pretend." Judge Vickers narrowed her eyes. He didn't pretend. His methods differ entirely from the solutions provided. But Givens didn't back down. "We can't allow a non-registered student to derail the competition. This is a formal event with strict structure." "Strict structure?" Vickers repeated sharply. "Or selective structure?" A visible tension crackled between them. Givens stepped closer to her. "This school has a reputation," he murmured tightly, "and we're not letting it get destroyed because a janitor's kid wants attention." Several people heard it. A teacher gasped. A student covered her mouth. Devon's face tightened, not wounded, not humiliated, just quietly disappointed, as if he had expected exactly this. Judge Vickers' expression hardened into steel. "Principal Givens," she said loudly, "what you just said is unacceptable." But he didn't apologize. He merely adjusted his tie and muttered something under his breath. Something Devon wasn't supposed to hear. But he did, because the gym was too quiet, and the words were too clear. "This can't be allowed." Devon's breath caught. Judge Vickers whipped her head toward him. "What did you say?" Givens' eyes widened, as he realized what he had spoken aloud. "I meant the disruption. This whole "No," Vickers snapped. "You meant him." The room erupted again, louder, angrier, more chaotic. Devon stood on the stage, the weight of everything he had lived through pressing in at once. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, ignored, and now, openly rejected by the man who ran the school. The judges exchanged troubled looks. Teachers whispered anxiously. Ellis gripped his mop, eyes stinging. And Devon remained still. Quiet. Steady. The storm had begun. Principal Givens turned to the judges and muttered, "This can't be allowed." Behind closed doors, the real test begins. Not of math, but of character. The next morning, Rutherford High felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just colder, like the oxygen had been quietly siphoned from the hallways overnight. A tension hung in the air that didn't have a name yet, but everyone felt it. Students walked faster, teachers spoke softer, and at the center of the quiet storm was Devon Gaines. He arrived early, as usual, his backpack slung low on one shoulder, his hands tucked into his sleeves. But unlike yesterday, there were no nods from teachers, no casual greetings, only sidelong glances and whispers that stopped mid-sentence when he got too close. Even the janitorial staff looked uncomfortable, unsure if they were allowed to acknowledge him now that the world knew he was something more than just Ellis's boy. Devon kept his head down and moved through it all with quiet resolve. But the silence followed him, more suffocating than any words could be. In the faculty lounge, the quiet had broken into whispers. 12 teachers gathered around the oval table, the room thick with the smell of burnt coffee and old chalk dust. The blinds were drawn. Voices were low. Ms. Harper, head of the math department, flipped through a printout of Devon's Olympiad solutions. "It's not just that he got them right," she said. "It's how. His method on problem 4 was cleaner than anything our top students produced." Coach Denton shook his head. "And that's exactly the problem." Mr. Calloway frowned. "What do you mean, problem?" Denton leaned forward. "Let's stop pretending this won't blow back on us. 5 perfect white students. Our best failed. And the janitor's son walked in and rewrote the entire narrative. Parents are already calling the district. Miss Harper sighed. I've gotten 7 emails this morning. 2 demanded to know why Devin was allowed on stage. 1 accused us of manipulating the results to be woke. Coach Denton said nothing for a beat. Then with unsettling calm added, our funding's tied to those 5 kids. One of them's on the state senator's scholarship track. A silence followed, the kind that hangs after something important has been said out loud for the first time. Judge Marianne Vickers had already emailed the school requesting an official submission of Devin's work. She wanted his answers to be reviewed for possible state-level recognition, even though he hadn't been registered. Her email was polite, professional, but every teacher at the table read between the lines. She was taking Devin seriously. Too seriously. We can't allow that, Miss Harper said quietly. Mr. Calloway stared at her. Why not? Because, she replied without meeting his eyes. It opens a door we're not ready to walk through. What happens when every student who wasn't selected starts questioning the system? The hierarchy? Do we let any kid just walk up during competitions now?
It's not any kid, Calloway argued. It's Devin Gaines. He earned that stage.
Harper shrugged. He didn't register, Coach Denton added. And that's the only argument we need. The rulebook is clear. Registration is mandatory. End of story. At the door, unseen by them, Ellis Gaines stood frozen. He had just emptied the trash cans, along the hallway. His cart sat quietly next to the coffee machine. The door had been left open a crack, just wide enough for words to slip through. He had only come in to mop the floor. Now he felt like the floor. He heard every word. Our funding. He didn't register. We can't allow that. They weren't talking about his son like a student. They were talking about him like a threat. Ellis backed out slowly, quietly pulling his cart with him. He didn't say a word to anyone for the rest of the morning. By third period, Devin noticed the change more clearly. His assigned seat in Algebra 2 had been moved to the back of the room without explanation. The teacher, Miss Kramer, avoided his gaze and never once called on him, even when he raised his hand. In chemistry, the lab partner he had worked with for 2 semesters asked to switch tables. Nothing personal, the boy mumbled. But Devin saw the discomfort in his eyes, the desire to put distance between himself and controversy. During lunch, Devin sat at a table by the vending machines, alone. Students kept their distance. A few stared. Others whispered. The Elite 5, Jacob, Kylie, Trent, Madison, Hunter walked past him together like a wall. Kylie shot him a glance full of something more complex than anger. Embarrassment, maybe, or guilt. He couldn't tell. But none of them spoke to him. He had expected silence. But this felt different. This felt like punishment. In the administrative office, the pushback had begun. Judge Vickers' second email was firmer. She requested Devin's solutions be submitted to the State Math League within 48 hours for review, even without official registration. She cited exceptional circumstances, academic integrity, equity. Principal Givens didn't respond immediately. Instead, he met privately with district officials and board members, expressing concerns about precedent, about external pressure influencing internal processes. When one board member suggested inviting Devin to compete next year, Givens shook his head. There's more at stake here than one student's feelings, he said. And then, in a room full of adults supposedly trained to protect and support young minds, someone used the word that would later haunt Devin for months. Outlier. At the end of the school day, Devin opened his locker. He was already tired. Not from classes. Not from math. From being watched. From hearing his name whispered like a threat. From pretending he didn't hear it. But when the locker door swung open, the breath left his lungs. Inside, scrawled in red marker, across his books, his schedule, and the back wall of the locker, were 6 letters. CHEA. Bold. Angry. Underlined 3 times. His papers were ripped. His geometry notes had been shredded and stuffed back in. His lunch container had been smashed. Devin stared at it. Not shocked. Not surprised. But heavy. As if each letter added 20 more pounds to the air around him. A group of freshmen passed by laughing. One looked into the locker, saw the red writing, and nudged the other. They didn't say anything, but their smirks said enough. Devin didn't react. He simply shut the locker slowly, pressing it closed with both hands, as if sealing something inside. He didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't report it, because somewhere deep inside he already knew what the school would say. There were no cameras facing his locker. no witnesses who would speak. And most of all, no one in power who wanted this truth to exist. Back in the staff lounge, Coach Denton sipped his coffee and looked down at his phone. An anonymous message had appeared. No name, no number, just a photo. A snapshot of Devin's locker, the word cheater, gleaming in red.
No caption.
No explanation, just proof. And a question the school could no longer ignore. That night, Devin found his locker covered in red marker. Cheater. One leaked clip turned a silent injustice into a national uproar. The red marker ink hadn't dried yet when the video hit the internet. It began with a shaky frame. A close-up of Devin on stage, sleeves pushed up, marker in hand, solving equations with a speed and calm that didn't match his surroundings. The resolution was grainy, the audio muffled by gym echoes. But the image was clear enough. A black boy in old jeans and a stretched hoodie stood alone in front of a crowd that didn't want him there. He solved the final equation, turned slowly to face the silent audience, and set the marker down.
The video cut out.
No context, no commentary, just raw footage uploaded to TikTok by a sophomore named Lucas Hayes, who had filmed it from the bleachers more out of boredom than interest. His caption read, "The janitor's son just solved what 5 rich kids couldn't." Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. By the next morning it had 3. Twitter threads broke it wide open. His name is Devin Gaines. He wasn't allowed to compete. He wasn't even invited. But he solved every problem perfectly. This kid was never given a chance. He took it anyway. Janitor's son makes school's best students look average. Rutherford High is about to explain why this genius isn't on their math team.
The hashtag spread like wildfire. Let Devin compete.
Devin did it. Math justice. And with it came the anger. Thousands of comments poured in. Some cheered. Others demanded accountability. But the video also invited something else. Scrutiny. Media outlets scrambled to verify the story. Local stations picked it up by noon, calling the school office non-stop. By 3 p.m., a national outlet had published an article with the headline, "Ignored Genius or Token Distraction." The truth about Rutherford's math prodigy. Principal Givens hadn't prepared for this. He stood in his office reading headlines with clenched jaws. A legal advisor from the district sat across from him, visibly sweating. "We need to control the narrative," Givens snapped. "How?" The advisor replied. "You kicked the kid off stage. There's video. The country thinks we're suppressing a black prodigy. We didn't kick him off. We just followed policy." But policy didn't trend on Twitter. Injustice did. Devin didn't even know he'd gone viral until he saw his face on a classmate's phone screen during lunch. He sat alone, again in the far corner of the cafeteria. The table next to him burst into loud chatter. "That's him, right? Yeah, that's his sweatshirt. Dude, he's on CNN's Instagram. Think he's gonna be on TV?" He turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing at the glowing screens showing his frozen image on stage. Mouth closed, hands still. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had just wanted to solve problems. The school issued a statement that afternoon. Principal Givens stood at a podium in front of the school building, flanked by faculty members and 2 uncomfortable students from the Elite 5, Madison and Trent, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "The Math Olympiad is a prestigious event with strict requirements," Givens read from a sheet. "While we encourage all students to pursue academic excellence, Mr. Devin Gaines was not a registered participant and therefore not eligible for formal recognition. That said, we are proud of his curiosity and potential, and we are reviewing all processes to ensure inclusivity." He smiled for the cameras. It didn't land. The internet lit up with outrage. Curiosity and potential. He solved the damn test. Strict requirements is racism in a blazer. Back at home, Ellis was pacing. His phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from reporters, old friends, strangers from out of state. "Mr. Gaines, we'd love a quote. We're trying to get your son on a panel. Would Devin consider a sponsorship from—" Ellis turned them all down. He stood in their small apartment kitchen, his palms resting on the counter, his shoulders tense. "This isn't good," he muttered. Devin sat on the couch staring at the muted news coverage on TV, showing a still frame of him writing on the board. "You're trending worldwide," the news anchor was saying. "It doesn't feel good," Devin said softly. Ellis turned to him. "It's not meant to. Fame doesn't mean protection." Devin nodded. He already knew. The next day, Devin wasn't allowed into his 3rd period class. Miss Kramer met him at the door with a strained expression. "Devin," she said, lowering her voice, Principal Givens thinks it's best if you study in the library today. Why? For your safety. He glanced past her at the students already seated. Some stared back. Some looked away. Did someone threaten me? He asked. No, she said quickly. But there's a lot of attention right now. This is just a precaution. He didn't argue. He turned and walked to the library, where a staff member handed him a worksheet packet and told him to stay at a back table. The packet wasn't even from his class. It was basic algebra. He flipped through the pages silently, then closed it. Outside the library window, he could see a small group of reporters stationed near the school's entrance. One of them held up a microphone when she saw him. He ducked his head and disappeared behind a bookshelf. By noon, students started receiving warnings for reposting the video on school grounds. A junior got detention for posting a meme that read, "Devin tirade the entire math team." Teachers were instructed to avoid engagement with the story. Coach Denton whispered to another teacher, "This is a circus," to which Miss Harper replied, "It's a reckoning." Still, the administration doubled down. The official school Instagram quietly deleted comments mentioning Devin. The website's academic awards page was taken offline. The hallway posters of the 5 Olympiad competitors were quietly taken down, but the truth had already left the building. At home that night, Ellis sat across from Devin at the dinner table, untouched food between them. "They're not going to let this go," Ellis said. Devin didn't respond. "They're going to protect their image before they protect you." "I know. You want to stay home tomorrow?" "No." Ellis studied his son carefully. "This attention, it's a spotlight, but it's also a target. And this school, they'll use every rule they can to bury you. I'm not scared of their rules." "You should be." Ellis's voice cracked. "Not out of weakness, but out of experience. I clean those teachers' floors, Devin. I hear how they talk. You didn't beat the system. They think you embarrassed it, and they'll make you pay for that." Devin stared down at his plate. "They already are," he whispered. The next day, as students exited the building, a reporter slipped past the security barrier. She wore a gray coat and moved with purpose. Devin was just reaching the sidewalk when she stepped in front of him. Microphone raised, camera already recording. "Devin," she said brightly. "Just one question." He froze. Ellis, a few paces behind, started toward him, but the microphone was already in his face. The reporter leaned in slightly. "Are you being silenced by Rutherford High?" Everything around him paused. Buses idling. Students talking. The wind pushing loose leaves across the sidewalk. Devin looked at her. Really looked. And he understood. No matter how much math he solved, this was the equation they wanted. Black boy defiance. His threat. He didn't answer, but his silence, once again, spoke louder than anything else. A reporter cornered Devin after school and asked, "Are you being silenced?" When silence is shattered, racism hides behind bureaucracy. By the time the school board announced the emergency meeting, the building itself felt like it was holding its breath. The announcement came via email, brief, formal, and sterilized. "In light of recent media attention surrounding the Math Olympiad incident, the board will convene to address community concerns. Attendees must register. Limited public speaking slots available, but people didn't need to speak to feel what was at stake." The night of the meeting, Rutherford High's auditorium looked transformed. Long folding tables formed a barrier between the board and the public. Cameras lined the back wall. The press sat in a roped-off row, flipping open notepads and adjusting recorders. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving the stage a washed-out, almost clinical look. At the center of it all sat Devin and Ellis Gaines, surrounded by strangers who hadn't known their names 2 weeks ago, but now stared at them like walking controversies. Devin wore a pressed button-up, his only one. Ellis wore the same black jacket he used for job interviews, its cuffs slightly frayed. They sat side by side in the second row, the front reserved for speakers. Around them, murmurs twisted through the room, like wind through dry leaves. "Is that him? That's the kid who went viral. Why's the janitor sitting up front?" Devin sat straight, eyes fixed on the board members filing onto the stage. He didn't fidget, but his foot tapped slowly, like a metronome ticking beneath the silence. The meeting opened with protocol. Roll call, legal disclaimers, procedural jargon. Then came the opening statement from board chairwoman Karen Albright, a woman whose polished exterior, blonde bob, ivory blouse, calm voice, masked the steel beneath. "We are gathered tonight not to cast blame, but to clarify process," she said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. This district remains committed to academic integrity and fairness for all students, regardless of background. It was the kind of line meant to sound safe, sound progressive. But Ellis heard the coldness behind the word, regardless. Next came the review of the Olympiad results. A data projector displayed the failure rates. 5 names, all white, all elite, listed with red marks, and then beneath them, a slide titled Unregistered Performance, D. Gaines. Karen Albright cleared her throat. While Mr. Gaines' performance was impressive, we must acknowledge that he was not a registered participant. Therefore, his results are not valid within the official competition rubric. Gasps and murmurs followed. Devin didn't move, but Ellis's jaw tightened. He stood. "I'd like to speak." Karen nodded mechanically. "Mr. Gaines, you have 2 minutes." Ellis stepped to the microphone. "My son wasn't registered," he began, his voice low but clear, because no one told him he could register. A few people nodded. A few frowned. "I clean this school every night. I've mopped those hallways for years. I've watched bulletin boards, announcements, faculty meetings. Not once did I see a flyer, an email, a notice that said the Math Olympiad was open to all." A pause. "Why do you think that is?" No answer. Ellis's eyes scanned the stage. "You talk about fairness and policy. But policy only matters if it's accessible. If the only students who knew about registration are the same ones who win every year, is that fairness?" Karen shifted in her chair. Ellis leaned forward slightly. "If this had been about integrity, you'd be asking why my son had to solve problems on a discarded whiteboard in a hallway while others had tutors. But instead, you were asking if he followed the right process." He stepped back without waiting for applause. There was none. Just silence and stares. Then something no one expected happened. Board member Ruby Whitaker, the only black person on the panel, cleared his throat. "I have a question," he said, his voice clipped and measured. "How were this year's 5 competitors selected?" Karen blinked. "They were nominated by the math department. And the criteria? Based on GPA, past competition history, and teacher recommendations." Ellen's eyes narrowed. "So if a student wasn't previously selected or favored, they would have no way in." "That's not how we describe it," Karen replied. "But it's how it works." Karen tried to pivot. "We follow protocol. The registration process was outlined." Ellen cut her off. "How many students of color have competed in the last 5 years?" The auditorium hushed. Karen opened her folder. Stalled. "I don't have that data in front of me." "I do," Ellen said, pulling out a sheet. 0. Not 1. He looked down at Devin. "Until now." Gasps rippled again. This time, louder. Karen leaned forward, her tone tightening. "We cannot allow sentiment to override rules." "It's not sentiment," Ellen replied. "It's systemic. And this boy just exposed it." The board erupted into back-and-forth arguments. Some tried to stay neutral. Others openly pushed to dismiss Devin's results as unauthorized participation. The phrase came up 3 times. In the audience, Devin looked to his father. "They're not listening," he whispered. Ellis placed a hand on his shoulder. "They hear you. They're just afraid of what it means." Then came the twist. A journalist from the local paper stood up in the press row. She raised her hand. "I have a copy of the Math League's open registration guidelines," she said. "It says schools must post and distribute registration info to all eligible students." She held up the printed page. Karen Albright froze. "Did Rutherford High distribute that notice?" the journalist asked. Principal Givens, seated just off stage, leaned forward. "We emailed it to the selected students, not to the whole student body." The journalist pressed. "No, that wasn't necessary." A pause. The silence that followed was heavier than anything spoken all night. When the meeting adjourned, people didn't cheer. They filed out slowly, digesting the quiet truth they'd just witnessed. Not a scandal, but a system, exposed by its own rules. Devin and Ellis left without saying much. The hallway lights flickered slightly as they walked toward the exit. Outside, a group of students stood by the flagpole, watching them. Some smiled. Some just stared. Devin didn't look back. He just walked forward. That night, Ellis opened the mailbox. Bills, a grocery flyer, and 1 white envelope. Unmarked. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter typed. No signature. No header. It read, "Dear Mr. Gaines, due to recent disruptions, your custodial contract is under review. We will contact you shortly regarding your employment status. Administration." He read it 3 times. then sat down on the steps of their apartment complex, staring out at the dark, not angry, just tired. And for the first time in years, afraid. Outside the meeting, Ellis found a typed letter in his mailbox. His custodial contract was under review. When truth threatens power, they don't fight fair, they fight dirty. It began with Ellis's schedule. Monday morning, he clocked in at his usual 6:00 a.m. slot, only to find a clipboard note posted outside the custodial office door. Effective immediately. Part-time rotation in effect. Staff AD 3 days week. No warning. No explanation. He stared at the list. His name, Gaines, E. Highlighted in yellow. The ink bled slightly from a coffee stain. He didn't need to ask what it meant. It meant 3 days of work instead of 5. It meant 2 less paychecks a month. It meant someone upstairs wanted to remind him that boldness had a price. He stepped inside the office, confronted the supervisor. Is some kind of budget cut? The man didn't meet his eyes. District decision. Out of my hands. But Ellis had worked at Rutherford long enough to know whose hands pulled the strings. That same day, Devin received his progress report. It was thin. Too thin. He flipped through the single sheet, confused. His English grade had dropped from an A to a C. His science lab score, previously perfect, was listed as incomplete. His computer science elective, marked missing assignments, even though he'd submitted them early. He approached Ms. Kramer after class. I turned in the last 3 labs. She hesitated. I don't recall seeing them. I emailed them. Her tone cooled. You should have followed the upload instructions. I did. I have the confirmation. She didn't ask to see it. Instead, she turned her back. By Friday, Devin's name was gone from the honor roll display case in the main hallway. It had been printed there for 3 straight semesters, etched in gold foil under academic excellence. Now it had vanished. No note. No replacement. Just a blank space where his name used to be. Students noticed. Whispers resumed. Maybe it was fake anyway. Probably lied about his GPA. He just got lucky with that math thing. The story had started to turn. Online anonymous accounts began surfacing. One Twitter handle posted, "Sources say Devin Gaines cheated." Whole thing was staged. Another screenshot claimed, "Insider says janitor's kid hacked test system." No way he did that alone. The posts spread fast. And worse, people started believing them. Principal Givens didn't issue any public statement. But privately, he was working overtime. In a closed-door meeting with a group of influential parents, those whose children were on the track, he laid the groundwork. I'm not saying the boy isn't smart, he began carefully. But we must question whether he's the right fit for our academic leadership environment. A mother in pearls leaned in. What are you implying? Givens smiled. He didn't follow proper procedure. He embarrassed this institution on a national stage. And frankly, our donors are concerned. A father in a Navy suit added, "We're not sending our kids here for circus stunts. We're investing in tradition." Givens nodded. I understand completely. Rest assured. Steps are being taken. No one mentioned Devin's name aloud. They didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew who the problem was. Only one teacher broke rank. Mr. Lattimore, the newest hire in the math department, was young, black and passionate about education equity. He saw what was happening and refused to stay silent. He filed an official request for Devin to be moved into the advanced math track. The request was denied in under 48 hours. He followed up with an email to the department chair, asking for justification. No reply. 2 days later, he received a letter from HR stating he had violated professional conduct protocols by interfering with ongoing disciplinary review. The message was clear: stop fighting for the boy, or pay the price. He stopped speaking out, but he didn't stop watching. Devin noticed the shift too. Students who once admired him now looked at him with narrowed eyes. One girl dropped her notebook in front of him, then scoffed when he bent to pick it up. Don't bother, she muttered. You'll probably fake the grade for it anyway. In gym class, a boy made a loud joke about mopping the floor like his daddy. Some laughed. Devin didn't react. He learned early that reactions gave them power. But silence didn't protect him either. Each insult was like a drip of acid. Small, slow, but unrelenting. Online, the campaign against him escalated. A fake email leaked, fabricated but styled convincingly, allegedly from Devin to Judge Vickers, thanking her for secretly preloading the answers. It was nonsense. But the internet doesn't care about truth, only spectacle. Comment sections filled with doubt. Even some of the original supporters began walking it back. I'm not saying he lied, but the whole thing's just weird.
Why won't the school confirm his grades?
There's always more to these stories. At home, Ellis tried to shield Devin. He cooked more, cleaned more, asked fewer questions. But Devin saw the signs, the worn shoes that hadn't been replaced, the electric bill that sat unopened on the kitchen counter, the way his father's hands shook slightly when he reached for his coffee mug. They didn't talk about it, because the truth already filled every quiet space between them. One night, Devin sat at his desk, solving a differential equation. He didn't need to. It wasn't homework. But math was still the only place the world made sense. A knock came at the front door. Ellis answered. It was Mr. Lattimore. He stood nervously, holding a manila folder. I shouldn't be here, he said, eyes darting to the hallway. But I can't watch them destroy him. Ellis stepped aside. Lattimore handed Devin the folder. Inside were internal memos, emails, documents showing the school's attempts to phase out non-traditional academic participants after the Olympiad. One memo mentioned Devin by name. Another included a recommendation from Principal Givens, reassign student to remedial courses pending further review. Devin stared at the pages, then closed the folder. What do I do? He asked. Lattimore met his eyes. You stay visible. You don't shrink. That's what they want. The next day at school, Devin arrived early. The hallways were empty. His locker stood untouched. He opened it and froze. Inside, pinned to the back wall, was a torn piece of his last geometry test. Stapled to it, in crooked, aggressive strokes, was a white sheet of paper. One word typed in bold capital letters. LIAR. The test itself had been ripped in half. The grade an A+ sliced straight through. He didn't speak. Didn't call a teacher. He took the paper out, folded it once, and placed it in his backpack. Then shut the locker door. Hard. Outside, the morning announcements crackled over the loudspeakers. No one mentioned the incident. No one even asked. But the silence said everything. Devin Gaines was no longer a quiet math prodigy. He was a problem, a symbol, a threat. And now, the school had declared war. Devin opened his locker and found a torn test paper with the word liar stapled across it. When institutions betray brilliance, the streets become classroom. The word liar still echoed in Devin's mind as he walked to class that morning. Not because it hurt more than the other words. He was already bruised by whispers, by silence, by the look teachers gave him when they thought he wasn't looking, but because of what it symbolized. It meant they weren't just trying to ignore him anymore. They were trying to erase him. But someone else had noticed. 2 hallways over, in the student lounge beside the drama department, a small group gathered. 6 students sat close, heads bent, phones out, voices low. At the center was Tanisha Martin, a sharp-witted junior with braids that brushed her shoulders, and an expression that said she wasn't here to play by anyone's rules. Tanisha had been quiet when Devin's video first went viral, but when the honor roll plaque was updated and his name disappeared, she'd gone still, and then furious. She'd watched teachers act like they didn't see what was happening. Watched students drift from celebration to suspicion like it was natural. Watched the school smile through its teeth at cameras, while cutting Devin off at the knees. She wasn't going to let it slide. He didn't ask for fame, she said. He solved problems, and now they're treating him like one. A boy named Malik leaned in. So what do? We don't yell, she said. Not yet. That's what they expect. We walk, all of us, at once. Middle of second period. A girl named Jada raised her brow. Walk where?
Out, Tanisha said.
Front steps. Posters. Signs. Media's watching already. Let's give them something to write about. The next day, flyers appeared in bathroom stalls, slipped into lockers, shared in hushed whispers during lunch. Let genius rise. He solved what they couldn't. We are Devin. The plan was simple. Walk out during second period bell. No chants. No slogan. Just present. A wall of students choosing silence over silence. At 10:14 a.m., the bell rang. And from 4 different wings of the building, they moved. Not just the usual activists. Athletes, musicians, freshmen, seniors, Black, Latino, Asian, even a handful of white students, quiet but firm in step. They left classrooms one by one, teachers too stunned to react. By the time Devin looked up from his desk, he saw them through the window gathering on the school's front steps with hand-painted signs, dozens of bodies filling the front walk. He stood slowly, His teacher didn't stop him. She didn't say a word. Outside, Tanisha stood at the center. She held a cardboard sign in both hands.
This school failed first.
Another read. Let the boy breathe. Phones were out. Cameras rolled. Within minutes, clips were online. A local reporter arrived first, followed by 2 larger outlets. A drone camera buzzed above the school roof, capturing the protest from above, students forming the shape of a question mark on the pavement. A visual no one could ignore. Inside, chaos bloomed. Principal Givens stormed into the faculty lounge, red-faced. Who organized this? No one answered. Find out. Now. He turned to Ms. Harper. Call security. Start pulling students back into classroom. Harper hesitated. They're not being disruptive. They're breaking protocol. They're standing on the sidewalk. Givens slammed his palm on the table. They're threatening this school's image. Across the room, Mr. Lattimore stared at his coffee mug. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his hands were clenched tight under the table. Outside, Devin joined the group. Students made space for him without a word, circling him like a protective shell. Tanisha turned to him, eyes shining. You didn't ask for this, she said, but it still belongs to you. He didn't speak. He just nodded. By noon, news stations had begun replaying live footage. Pundits debated on split screens. Was this student-led protest a sign of a broken system or overreaction? One host sneered. So now every student who doesn't get their way should lead a walkout? Another replied, he did not get his way. He got erased. Online, the hashtags surged again. Let Devin speak. Students for justice.
Rutherford revolt.
Devin's face was on every screen. Again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Inside the school, pressure mounted. The district called. The board sent a formal statement requesting immediate response to unauthorized activity. Principal Givens called an emergency staff meeting. Any teacher who encouraged this will face disciplinary review, he said, voice shaking with fury. Someone asked, what about the student who started it? Givens didn't blink. Suspension. There was a beat of silence. Then Ms. Harper spoke, voice low. You're going to suspend a student for organizing peace? Givens' glare could have cracked glass. For insubordination. For inciting media spectacle. For costing us donors. Mr. Lattimore stood. What if we refuse to enforce it? Everyone turned. Givens smiled. Thin. Icy. Dangerous. Then you won't be enforcing anything, he said, because you'll be gone. That afternoon, students were sent back to class. Some coaxed, others forced. A few stood their ground until security moved in. The protest ended quietly, but the damage had already been done. Devin returned to class. His desk was empty, untouched, but on it sat a single piece of paper, a detention slip, failure to comply with school policies. He stared at it, then picked it up and slid it into his backpack. That evening, Ellis walked to the mailbox like he did every day. Bills, flyers, one envelope. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Inside was a list. 20 names, all students, all black or brown. At the bottom, in ink, flag for behavior review. Begin suspension procedures. Admin. The next morning, students returned to school, under gray skies. But at the front gate stood 2 security guards in yellow vests, holding clipboards, checking names, turning students away. No explanation. No eye contact. Just control. Just fear. And Devin, walking toward the gate with his backpack, saw the clipboard as the guard checked it. His name. First on the list. The next morning, security guards waited at the school gate with a list of names. When silence fails, power starts punishing openly. The clipboard wasn't just a list. It was a message. By the time the first period bell rang that morning, 12 students had been pulled aside, including Devin. They were told to report not to their homerooms, but to a classroom in the back of the school wing, labeled temporary study session. No reason. No documentation. Just orders. The room had no windows. One teacher sat in silence, checking names off a printed sheet like an attendance officer at a prison. Desks were separated by 6 feet. No talking, no phones, no questions. Devin sat near the back, trying not to stare at the walls, painted a dull beige that made time feel slower. A girl 2 rows up, one of the students who had walked out with a sign that read, "Let genius rise," stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. They weren't in school anymore. They were in holding. By noon, the room's nickname had already spread. Protest detention. Rumors flew. Some said the administration called it a study hall. Others called it what it was, punishment with paperwork. Outside the room, teachers pretended not to notice. Some avoided eye contact. Some whispered in faculty lounges that it was for safety. One even said, "They need to understand there are consequences." But the consequences weren't for disruption. They were for disobedience, for visibility, for refusing to shrink. In the days that followed, the campaign escalated. Devin showed up to his advanced calculus class, one he'd been excelling in all year, only to find his name had been removed from the roll. "You're not listed anymore," the teacher said, without meeting his eyes. "I've been in this class all semester. Take it up with the office." He did. The registrar told him he was being reassigned to a more appropriate track. No explanation, no hearing, no appeal. Just reassignment to a lower-level course, where none of the students looked like the Elite Five. Across campus, Mr. Lattimore's classroom was locked. Students arrived Monday morning to find a substitute in his place, a long-term fill-in with a vague explanation. The board had received a complaint, they said. Improper boundaries. No detail. Just enough to stain his name. Mr. Lattimore wasn't arrested, wasn't charged. But he was gone. Without warning. Without cause. Another voice silenced. At home, Ellis received a letter slipped under the school custodial door. Final warning. The reason: creating a disruptive climate through indirect student influence. He read it twice, then folded it and put it in his pocket. He didn't say a word to Devin, but when he got home he made dinner with shaking hands. 2 days later, Devin was called to the front office. He hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't spoken in class, hadn't replied to the snide comments whispered his way. But the secretary handed him a slip and said, "Security will meet you in the library." He walked there slowly, backpack swinging gently. At the door, uniformed security officer waited with arms crossed. "Empty your bag," he said. "Why?" "Random search." "I haven't done anything." "Didn't say you did." Devin stared at him, then slowly opened his backpack and laid out the contents: notebooks, pencils, a calculator, a library copy of The Man Who Knew Infinity. The guard flipped through it all, then nodded. "You can go." 2 days later, it happened again. Online, things grew worse. A screenshot began circulating. It showed a fake Reddit post written under an anonymous handle, with a long caption: "I used to tutor Devin. He's not that smart. His dad helped him fake everything." This whole thing is media spin. They're using race to cover up a scam. No name, no source. But it didn't matter. It spread fast. Screenshots became headlines. Bloggers used it. Commenters weaponized it. I knew it. Affirmative action nonsense. They'll call anything racism these days. Some of the same people who once shared his video with hashtags of support were now deleting their posts. Or worse, turning on him. The tide had shifted. From awe to skepticism. From celebration to suspicion. From support to silence. The school district finally released a formal statement. Polished, measured, cold. While we remain committed to protecting the integrity of all academic competitions, recent events have prompted an internal review. The district must uphold standards of conduct, and we caution against allowing internet speculation to override due process. We are investigating all claims, including those regarding unauthorized participation, staff conduct, and student behavior. To the public it sounded balanced, but inside the building, it was code. We are protecting ourselves. Not the student, not the teacher, not the truth. Devin felt it everywhere now. In the way students moved around him, giving wide berths. In the way teachers corrected him more harshly than others. In the way Ellis had started turning off the news when Devin entered the room. One afternoon, walking home, Devin passed a group of younger students. One of them nudged the other and whispered, not even trying to be quiet, "That's the liar." Devin didn't stop, didn't look back. But inside, something shifted, something cracked, and something hardened. That evening, Ellis returned home with 2 plastic grocery bags. He'd used the last of their food stamps. Bought only essentials: eggs, rice, canned soup. As he climbed the stairs to their apartment, he paused. A piece of paper flapped in the breeze. It was taped to their front door. White, stamped in red ink. Notice of eviction. 5 days to vacate. His keys fell from his hand. He picked them up slowly, then tore the paper from the door, and stood frozen on the stoop. His breath shallow, his fingers numb. Inside, Devin opened the door, saw his father standing there, paper clenched in his fist. Ellis said nothing, just handed it over. And for the first time in weeks, Devin spoke first. Are they trying to erase us? Ellis didn't reply. He just stared into the hallway, where their neighbors were already pretending not to look. A legal notice appeared on the Gaines' apartment door. An eviction notice. When the system tightens, help sometimes arrives from nowhere. The eviction notice lay on the dining table like a wound that refused to clot. Neither Ellis nor Devin touched it again after that first moment. It simply sat there between them, illuminated by the flickering overhead light in their cramped kitchen. The thin paper carried a weight heavier than any textbook Devin had ever held, a threat dressed as a formality. Ellis lowered himself into the nearest chair, shoulders collapsing inward. They're not even hiding it anymore, he whispered. Devin sat across from him. He didn't look scared. He looked tired. Not physically, but bone-deep worn, as if every insult, every whisper, every act of sabotage had collected inside him like sediment. Dad, he said quietly, we can fight this. Ellis rubbed his forehead. Fight with what? We can't afford a lawyer, and no one at that school is going to testify for us. They already made an example out of Lattimore. They'll do worse to anyone who steps up now. Devin didn't argue. He knew his father was right. The weight of systemic power wasn't theoretical anymore. It was on their door, wearing legal font. But Devin also knew something else. The system wasn't invincible. He'd seen equations collapse when you pushed at the right point. He wondered if injustice worked the same way. He looked down at his hands. They didn't shake. They just curled slightly at the edges, as if gripping an invisible thread he wasn't ready to let go of. I can't just disappear, he murmured. Ellis didn't hear him, or pretended not to. Both sat in silence, dinner growing cold on the stove. It was nearly 9 p.m. when the knock came on the door. 3 short taps, then 1 long. Ellis froze. They weren't expecting anyone, and neighbors never knocked that politely. He stood slowly, walking to the door with the caution of someone bracing for more bad news. Devin rose too, standing behind his father but slightly to the side. Ellis opened the door. Standing in the hallway was a woman in a long slate gray coat, a leather briefcase in one hand and a suitcase beside her. She looked like she had been on the road for hours, hair pulled back tightly, eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses, posture tall but exhausted. Mr. Gaines? She asked. Ellis blinked. Yes? The woman extended a card. Camille Hart, civil rights attorney. Hart & Associates, Boston, MA. I'm here because of your son. Ellis's eyes widened. Devin stepped forward. Camille continued. I saw the video of him solving those Olympiad problems. But more importantly, I saw what came after. The retaliation. The sabotage. The coordinated effort to erase him. Ellis stared at her. How did you even find us? There aren't many public records for your complex, she said with a faint, knowing smirk. But the internet is a powerful map, and injustice leaves a trail if you know where to look. She paused. May I come in? Ellis hesitated 1 second too long. Devin spoke for him. Yes, please. Inside, Camille set her suitcase gently by the door and took a seat at the dining table, directly across from the eviction notice. She studied it, then looked up. This came today? Ellis nodded. We haven't missed rent. Not once. You don't have to, she said. Landlords serving vulnerable families illegal notices is a textbook tactic when they're pressured by institutions. What do you mean pressured? Ellis asked. Camille leaned back slightly, folding her arms. I've handled cases like this before. When a school district wants someone quiet, they don't have to confront you in the classroom. They confront you in the shadows. Housing, employment, they squeeze until you fold. Ellis swallowed. We're not looking for more trouble. You didn't cause the trouble, Camille replied. You exposed it. Devin watched her carefully. The way she spoke, the way her voice didn't tremble when she said the word injustice. Most adults tried to soften it. Camille sharpened it. Why us? He finally asked. You don't even know us. Camille looked at him, expression softening. I know your story, and it's not as rare as people want to believe. Systems are built to keep brilliance predictable. You were never supposed to show up on that stage, and when you did, you became a threat. Not because of your attitude, but because of your ability. She leaned forward. And threats get punished. Ellis crossed his arms. So you want to help us? No, she corrected gently. I want to represent you. For free? Ellis asked skeptically. Pro bono, she said. Every now and then, a case comes along that demands intervention. Your son didn't just solve math problems. He exposed structural abuse. The school retaliated. The district retaliated. Now your landlord is joining the chorus. Devin absorbed the words carefully. And what would you do? He asked. Camille opened her briefcase. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, teacher reports, social media posts, pages upon pages. Devin stiffened. He recognized some of the documents. Camille noticed. The internet doesn't delete anything, she said. And whistleblowers don't either. Whistleblowers, Ellis repeated, confused. Camille smiled slightly. Your son has more allies than you think. Fear keeps their names quiet, but they're evidence that speaks. She slid a stack of papers across the table. These, she said, are procedural violations. Here's a list of state-mandated academic notices the school failed to deliver. Here are emails showing selective communication with only white students. For competition prep. Here, she tapped a page, are internal memos targeting your son, after the Olympiad. And this, she placed a final document on top, is the district's budget forecast, showing donor contracts explicitly tied to the 5 students who failed. Ellis stared. Devin stared harder. It was all there. Proof. Cold. Undeniable. Documented. Ellis exhaled shakily. This is bigger than we thought. Camille nodded. That's why you need representation. And why the district will fight this tooth and nail. They'll try to paint you as unstable, as overreacting, as uneducated, as attention-seeking. The classic playbook. She turned to Devin. And they will come at you the hardest. Because your existence makes their structure look flawed. Devin's voice came out quiet but certain. Then let's fight. Ellis turned, startled. Devin. No, Dad, he said, meeting his father's eyes. You told me to be careful with the system. To know how it works. Well, now I know. And I'm tired of being scared. Camille smiled, not out of triumph, but recognition. You remind me of another boy I represented once, she said. He didn't win overnight. But he didn't lose either. She snapped her briefcase shut. I'll file the lawsuit tomorrow morning. Claims will include racial discrimination, denial of educational access, administrative retaliation, and civil rights violations. Ellis looked stunned. What happens once you file? War, she said simply. The lawsuit was filed at 8:12 a.m. the next day. By noon, media vans returned to Rutherford High, parking along the entire front entrance. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, thrusting microphones toward faculty members attempting to slip in unnoticed. Is it true the school retaliated against Devin Gaines? Why was the teacher who defended him removed? Did the district pressure the landlord to evict them?
No one answered.
No one dared. Inside the building, Principal Givens sat in his office staring at the printed lawsuit on his desk. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time since the Olympiad, his facade cracked. This could destroy us, he whispered. Beside him, the district attorney reviewed the claims. Lips pressed thin. You should have handled this quietly. It was quiet, Givens snapped, until outsiders got involved.
Now it's national.
Outside, Camille stood at a small podium, cameras flashing around her. The district thought they could intimidate a boy into silence, she said. They thought a janitor's salary and a fragile apartment lease could be used as leverage. What they didn't expect was resistance. Her voice carried. Strong. Steady. Unshakable. That evening, back at the apartment, Camille returned from a meeting and found something wedged under the door. A plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 5 words typed in black ink. Drop this case or disappear. She read it twice, then folded it neatly. Her expression didn't change. But her eyes did. Camille received an anonymous threat letter. Drop this or disappear. Sometimes the biggest test doesn't happen on paper. It happens under oath. The courthouse was older than it looked in pictures. Its stone columns stood like gatekeepers, towering over the crowd that had gathered by 8:30 a.m. A collection of reporters, supporters, skeptics, and those drawn by the electric pull of controversy. News vans lined the sidewalk. Protest signs dotted the crowd, some reading, "Protect Black Genius," others accusing the school of academic cleansing. Inside, the air was tight with tension. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of curiosity. On the right, parents from Rutherford High whispered behind sunglasses and pearls. On the left, students huddled together, eyes flicking nervously toward the courtroom doors. Camille Hart walked in, carrying a leather binder, her expression unreadable. She moved like someone who had walked into courtrooms where justice had already been choked. and knew how to resuscitate it. Behind her was Devin, pressed into a second-hand blazer, his shoulders squared with quiet defiance. Ellis sat beside him, silent but present, hands knotted together in his lap. They weren't here for drama. They were here to be heard. Judge Portman entered precisely at 9. He was older, white, skeptical. His reputation was one of procedural loyalty. He didn't like spectacle, and he despised lawsuits he saw as media bait. That made him dangerous. Camille knew she'd have to earn every inch of credibility. The district's attorney, Marshall Grant, wore a smug grin as he unpacked his files. A man who'd built his career defending systems, not students. When court opened, Grant launched first. He labeled the lawsuit a baseless smear campaign against Rutherford High, claimed the school had always been an equal opportunity academic institution, and argued that Devin's exclusion from competition was simply a matter of administrative oversight. Then he made the mistake of trying to frame Devin as a misinformed youth, manipulated by external legal pressure. That's when Camille stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace. She let her words do the walking. Your Honor, she said clearly, we intend to prove that Devin Gaines was not only qualified, but actively blocked from academic advancement due to systemic racial bias. That after he demonstrated excellence, the school retaliated. That retaliation took the form of grade tampering, isolation, unlawful searches, and ultimately eviction pressure. She turned, gesturing gently toward Devin, and will show that this wasn't random. It was deliberate, it was coordinated, and it was devastating. Gasps echoed from the public seating. Judge Portman frowned, but nodded. Proceed. Devin was the first to take the stand. The courtroom hushed as he adjusted the microphone, the quiet scratch of fabric against wood filling the air. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked at Camille, then at the judge. She began gently. What is your full name? Devin Alexander Gaines. How old are you? 17. Have you ever received professional tutoring in math? No. Then how did you learn? Devin hesitated. From books. Discarded ones my dad brought home. Free online videos. Sometimes library printouts. And I'd study during his night shifts at school. Did anyone ever invite you to the Math Olympiad training group? No. Were you aware of its existence? No. Not until the event. Did you ever receive an apology from the administration for excluding you? No. His voice was calm, but the room heard the weight behind each no. Camille paused, then stepped forward. What happened after you solved the Olympiad problems? And here Devin's voice cracked. Not from weakness, but from the sharp cut of memory. They erased me, he said. My name disappeared from everything. Teachers stopped calling on me. My locker was vandalized. They searched my backpack like I was a threat. My dad lost hours. We were evicted. All because I solved something I wasn't supposed to. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge leaned forward. Next came Principal Givens. He took the stand with forced composure, his tie slightly loosened, sweat already forming near his temples. Camille approached with surgical precision. Mr. Givens, did you select the 5 students who competed in the Olympiad? Yes. Were they all white? Race wasn't a factor.
But they were all white?
Yes. Did you inform any black students of the opportunity? We posted it publicly. Where? The bulletin board. Camille handed him a printed photo. Is this the bulletin board? Tucked behind the staircase in the east wing with a broken light bulb above it. He faltered. It may be. Do you consider that accessible? It's technically public. Camille paced slightly, then turned. Do you know what procedural requirements exist for student searches? Yes. Did you follow them when Devin's bag was searched twice? Givens blinked. The safety officer has discretion. Not without probable cause or guardian notification. Were either provided. He said nothing. Camille pressed forward. Did you meet with donors following Devin's performance? I can't confirm. We have transcripts from those meetings. Principal Givens. She handed a sealed envelope to the judge. Emails in which you referred to Devin as, quote, a PR disaster who could damage our elite track. A ripple spread through the gallery. Judge Portman stared at Givens. Is that accurate? Givens looked down. I may have used strong language. Camille raised an eyebrow. Strong enough to justify tampering with his academic records. Objection, Grant shouted from across the room. Withdrawn, Camille said smoothly. But the damage was done. Then came the moment no one expected. Camille called Mr. Lattimore to the stand. He walked in like a man still bearing wounds, but his voice didn't shake. I was ordered to stop advocating for Devon, he said plainly. I was warned I'd be flagged for insubordination. When I pushed back, they fabricated a misconduct claim. They told me I was too invested in the wrong kind of student. Someone in the gallery gasped audibly. Camille asked, "Do you believe this was racially motivated?" "I don't believe it," he said. "I know it." The judge didn't interrupt. He simply let silence stretch like a reckoning. The final twist of the hearing came when Camille submitted testimonies from two anonymous teachers heavily redacted, but admissible. They confirmed grade inflation for select white students, confirmed that teachers were told not to intervene with Devon's situation, confirmed a disciplinary tracking document used only for students of color. It wasn't just retaliation. It was policy. Judge Portman sat with his hands steepled for a long time after closing remarks. Then he spoke. This case shows more than the failure of a single institution. It presents a pattern, one that may rise to the level of civil rights violations under state and federal law. He turned to Camille. The court finds sufficient evidence to proceed to full trial. The crowd exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath for weeks. Camille smiled slightly. Ellis gripped Devon's shoulder. Even Devon allowed himself a brief, slow blink of relief. They weren't finished. But they were no longer alone. That night, Camille parked her rental car outside the motel she'd checked into for the trial duration. The lot was mostly empty. She turned off the engine, gathered her briefcase, opened the door, and froze. All 4 tires had been slashed. The windows were shattered. A single sheet of paper fluttered from beneath the windshield wiper. She pulled it free. "Next time it won't be the car." Her breath steadied. Her fingers closed around the note. She looked toward the distant motel lights, then at the stars above, hidden behind city haze. They were trying to rattle her. They'd forgotten who they were dealing with. That night, Camille's car was vandalized. Tires slashed, windows smashed. The closer justice comes, the dirtier the opposition plays. The day after Camille's car was vandalized, she walked into court like nothing had happened. She didn't mention the note. She didn't flinch at the sight of security officers stationed near the courthouse doors. She simply adjusted her blazer, opened her binder, and began another round of filings. But outside the walls of justice, a different kind of war was unfolding. One where threats weren't made in courtrooms, but in shadows, alleyways, and folded paper. It started small. The Gaines's mailbox began receiving unsigned letters, typed messages, sealed in plain envelopes. "Drop the case. Go back to cleaning. Your son is a fraud, and you're just lucky we let him speak." Ellis read each one in silence, then tore them into shreds. At first, by the 6th letter, he stopped ripping them. He just folded them once and stuffed them into a shoebox beneath his bed. When Devon found it, the box was already full. The threats didn't stay anonymous for long. Camille's law firm in Boston was evacuated twice in 3 days due to bomb threats called in from burner phones. The building was searched, the staff shaken, the interns afraid to come back in. But Camille didn't blink. "I've argued against police departments," she told one of her associates. "This is intimidation. But it's not new." Still, the firm advised her to reconsider representing the case publicly. She didn't respond. She just bought a second lock for her motel door and moved the trial documents into a locked safe. She didn't trust digital anymore. Ellis's world shrank. He started noticing the same car parked near the school where he worked. A black sedan, engine always idling, windows tinted just dark enough to blur the driver's face. He thought he was imagining it, until he saw it again near the grocery store. And again on the corner of their apartment block. Once, walking home in the rain, he heard footsteps behind him. Fast, heavy. He turned quickly, but no one was there. Or maybe someone had been and ducked away. He started carrying his keys clenched between his fingers. And when he walked Devon to school, he didn't let go of his shoulder until they reached the front doors. Meanwhile, something strange began happening in public. Not attacks, not vandalism, something even more disorienting. Praise. People started recognizing Devon. At the gas station. On the bus. At school. A woman at the post office offered him a muffin and whispered, "You're making us proud." A man stopped Ellis at a red light and said, "I've got 2 sons. I hope they grow up like yours." News segments ran daily. Now some critical, but many sympathetic. One host called Devon a modern David, taking on a Goliath of education injustice. Another asked, "Why are we punishing brilliance that doesn't look the way the system wants it to?" Even national columnists weighed in. If this country can't protect the mind of a boy like Devin Gaines, then maybe it doesn't deserve the future he represents. But not everyone was celebrating. The school board backed into a corner and bleeding PR sent a private offer to Camille's team. A settlement. 6 figures. Non-disclosure agreement. The family would have to pull the lawsuit, sign paperwork stating the school acted in good faith, and agree not to pursue any future claims. Camille read the offer and said nothing for 5 full seconds. Then she handed it to Ellis. "This is their white flag," she said. "But it's soaked in shame." Ellis studied the document. The number was more money than he'd made in 10 years. His fingers trembled slightly. Then he passed it to Devin. The boy didn't hesitate. He read it once, then looked at Camille, and said, "This isn't just about me." Camille nodded. That's what I needed to hear. They didn't respond to the offer. The board never sent another. At the next rally, held outside the courthouse steps, local activists gathered with bullhorns and banners. Parents, students, teachers, and civil rights leaders stood side by side, chanting not with rage, but with resolve. Let brilliance rise. Education, not erasure. Stop the sabotage. Devin was asked to speak. He didn't want to at first. But when he stepped to the mic, something shifted. "I didn't choose the spotlight," he said, voice steady. "I chose math. I chose books. I chose to be better than what people expected from someone like me." He glanced at the crowd. "But they chose to make me a problem. And I'm done apologizing for being smart." The crowd erupted. Across the street, Principal Givens watched from behind tinted car windows. His jaw clenched. The next day, Camille prepared for a crucial witness. An internal school employee protected under whistleblower confidentiality had agreed to testify about staff meetings, grading manipulation, and targeted campaigns against black students. It was a bombshell. Camille rehearsed the questioning. Devin stayed quiet, curled in the corner of the motel room, studying old calculus problems like they were anchors in a storm. At 7:00 p.m., the witness confirmed they were ready to appear. At 9:00 p.m., they stopped responding to texts. By midnight, their phone was disconnected. Camille called the number again at 2:00 a.m., pacing the length of her motel hallway. Straight to voicemail. The following morning, Camille arrived at the courthouse early. She stood by the steps scanning the crowd, looking for the witness's familiar red scarf. Nothing. She checked her phone. Still no contact. A reporter approached. "Is it true a key witness went missing?" Camille didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Inside, she filed an emergency delay motion for testimony substitution. The judge approved it, but not without noting the sudden absence. That afternoon, she received a private message on her encrypted app. A single sentence. He was warned. Later that night, Ellis sat on the edge of his bed, the shoebox of threats at his feet. He looked at Devin. "You sure about this?" he asked softly. Devin didn't look up. He was sketching graphs on a scratch pad. "I was sure when they erased my name from the board," he said. "Now I'm just awake." Ellis didn't reply. He just nodded, and quietly locked the apartment door. Twice. A witness who was set to testify went missing the night before court. When the truth finally speaks, the world can no longer look away. The courtroom was colder than usual. That morning, Devin sat in the front row, not on the stand, but beside Camille, a pencil tucked behind one ear. His notepad was filled with diagrams, math problems and calculations, none related to the case, just a coping mechanism. Numbers made more sense than people. Camille, on the other hand, was unreadable. Her face was calm, but her hands were moving, flipping through pages, reorganizing evidence, double-checking her tabs. There was something she hadn't shared yet, something big. Ellis noticed. "You found something," he said quietly. Camille didn't look at him. "Maybe. Does it change things?" She finally glanced up. "It might change everything." Court began at 9:01 a.m. Judge Portman looked sharper than usual. The disappearance of the witness had not sat well with him, and whispers of obstruction charges had already started echoing through legal backchannels. Marshall Grant, the district's attorney, stood with a forced smile, prepared to deliver closing statements. That's when Camille stood. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit new evidence." Grant's face dropped. Portman narrowed his eyes. "This is highly irregular. We're hours from closing arguments." Camille nodded. "And that's why the timing matters. This wasn't available until 3:11 a.m. this morning. It came from an anonymous sender." She held up a printed email, 6 pages long, with headers, threads, timestamp. Judge Portman motioned for the bailiff. Bring it here. Camille handed the document over. For 30 seconds, the courtroom was silent as the judge read the top of the email. Then the silence cracked like glass. He looked up, visibly pale. Are these authentic? He asked. Camille nodded. I've already confirmed the metadata and IP trace. It originated from Rutherford High's internal network, specifically Principal Given's school email. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Portman's voice dropped. Read it aloud for the record. Camille stepped forward. In an email dated March 16th, Principal Givens wrote to senior staff and faculty, "We must quietly discredit Devin Gaines, without drawing press attention, reduce his grade averages, encourage academic referrals, and escalate any minor infractions to reinforce a pattern of volatility. Avoid written documentation where possible." Gasps echoed from every corner of the courtroom. Devin sat frozen. Ellis gripped the bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. Camille continued. A second email, same day, reads, "This incident could jeopardize our sponsorship funding. It is essential that Devin Gaines be redirected from any academic spotlight. If we treat this delicately, it will dissolve without scandal." A woman in the back row began crying softly. Camille finished. These emails were leaked by a staff member who couldn't carry the weight anymore. They remain anonymous for now. Judge Portman sat back in his chair, stunned. Marshall Grant was speechless, visibly scrambling through his papers. Camille didn't wait for him to recover. "Your Honor, this is not just bias. This is administrative conspiracy to suppress academic merit based on race. I move for immediate consideration of punitive damages, and for the court to refer this to the district attorney for criminal inquiry." Grant shot to his feet. "This is a last-minute ambush. We haven't had time." "The boy hasn't had time," Camille snapped. "He's been living in survival mode while this institution calculated his erasure." Judge Portman raised a hand. "Enough. Recess for 1 hour. I need time to review this." He stood, robe sweeping the bench, and disappeared through the courtroom door. The bailiff called, "Court is in recess." Camille turned to Devin. "You okay?" He didn't speak. He just looked at her. And for the first time since they met, his eyes filled with tears. Not fear, not sadness, but release. Like someone who had been underwater for too long, and had just found the surface. News broke before the hour ended. A court aide had leaked the email to a reporter waiting outside. By the time the judge returned to the bench, every major outlet had picked up the story. Principal instructed staff to discredit black student. Leaked email reveals school conspiracy. Education system's shame. What happened to Devin Gaines? Outside, protesters flooded the steps. The courthouse security tripled within minutes. When Judge Portman resumed his seat, the courtroom was already trembling with tension. "This court has reviewed the submitted evidence," he said slowly, "and I have instructed my clerk to immediately notify the district attorney's office for formal investigation into Rutherford High School's leadership." He turned to Camille. "You may proceed with your punitive motion." Camille didn't celebrate. She simply nodded.
Then she sat.
Let the storm do the rest. But the real climax came seconds later. 2 uniformed deputies entered from the side door and walked directly toward the defense table. "Principal Givens," one said, voice low but firm. "Please stand." Givens turned pale. "This is a courtroom," he muttered. "I'm not under arrest." "You're being escorted as part of an active investigation," the deputy said. "You can't, this is protocol, this is..." He turned to Grant, who did not move. Grant had already backed away from the table, hands up, as if separating himself from the wreckage. The deputies took Givens by the arms, not with violence, but with finality, and led him out through the back. The door shut. The courtroom exploded. Not with cheers, not with applause, but with stunned silence. The sound of truth landing too hard to ignore. Devin stood up slowly, still unsure if this was real. Camille placed a hand on his shoulder. "That," she said, "was the moment they couldn't lie anymore." News crews chased the story like wildfire. Live feeds captured Givens being led out of the courthouse. Editorials poured in. Social media lit up again. They tried to erase him, but the math wouldn't lie. This isn't about one school. It's about every student denied a seat at the table. Let this be a lesson to every institution that protects its image over its integrity. Devin's name trended again. This time, not just as a victim, but as a catalyst. A name the system could no longer bury. Outside the courthouse, Camille took a quiet moment to herself. She sat on a low stone wall, phone buzzing with press requests. her inbox overflowing. But her mind was elsewhere. She looked at the courthouse steps, at Ellis, speaking softly to reporters with his hands shaking slightly, at Devin surrounded by students, unsure of how to react to the sudden tide of attention. And she thought, not of lawsuits,
but of legacy.
of all the Devins who had come before, and all the ones who might now have a chance. Because one boy refused to sit quietly. Because one janitor believed his son was brilliant. Because one school made the mistake of thinking silence could be weaponized. That night the courthouse lights dimmed, but Camille's phone buzzed one last time. A blocked number. No voicemail, just a single text. He wasn't the only one. Camille read it twice. Her heartbeat slowed. She stood, looked out the motel window into the darkness, and whispered, "We're not done yet." Principal Givens was escorted from the courtroom by deputies. After the longest silence, the gavel finally speaks for the silenced. The jury didn't look at Devin when they returned to their seats. Not because they didn't care, because they did. Their faces were heavy with the knowledge that what they were about to deliver was not just a legal conclusion, but a historical correction. The forewoman, a black woman, in her 60s with silver streaks in her hair, held the paper in both hands as if it carried the weight of every unseen student who'd ever been overlooked. Judge Portman cleared his throat. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." She stood. "On the charge of racial discrimination, we find the school district guilty." A collective breath filled the room. "On the charge of academic retaliation, we find the school district guilty." A pause. "On the charge of procedural misconduct in student evaluation, guilty." No one moved. Not yet. Because there was more. The judge didn't speak right away. He looked at the jury, then at Devin, then at Camille. He removed his glasses slowly, as if even he needed a moment to let the truth settle. Based on the severity of the documented violations, the court awards the plaintiff, Devin Gaines, full reinstatement of academic standing, retroactive correction of his transcripts, and authorization to participate in all academic competitions for which he qualifies. Applause began. Quiet, then growing. The judge lifted his hand, allowing it. "For damages," he continued, "the court grants financial compensation in the amount of $275,000 for emotional, educational, and reputational harm." Ellis reached out, his hand trembling, and took Devin's. But the courtroom wasn't done watching history tilt. Ellis was called to the stand, not for testimony, but for acknowledgement. The superintendent, now interim since the resignation of the board chairwoman, stood and addressed him directly. "Mr. Gaines, your integrity during this process despite threats, pressure, and risk has been remarkable. We'd like to offer you a new position, District Facilities Operations Manager. Full benefits, retirement package, and a seat on the Equity Council." The courtroom applauded again, but Ellis didn't smile. He looked at Devin, then at Camille, then back at the superintendent. "Thank you," he said, voice low but steady. "But I didn't sweep floors so I could climb ladders. I did it so my son could rise without one." He declined the offer. In the room rose to its feet. Mr. Lattimore was next. Camille had already filed for reinstatement on his behalf, as part of the civil settlement. Now it was official. He was not only reinstated, but publicly promoted to Director of Student Advocacy and Support at Rutherford High. When he walked past Camille after the announcement, he stopped briefly and whispered, "Tell Devin I'll keep his seat warm until he returns." She nodded. He kept walking. Outside the courthouse, media lined the streets like a parade route. Reporters jostled to get the first quote, the first photo, the first reaction. But Devin didn't stop. He moved past cameras, past questions, past flashing lights. Camille protected his path like a silent shield. Ellis followed, one hand on his son's shoulder. No words, just peace. It wasn't loud. It was earned. That night, news outlets across the country exploded with the headlines. Devin Gaines wins historic lawsuit against school district. Justice for janitor's son. A modern academic David triumphs. Scholarship fund launched in honor of Devin Gaines. Camille's phone rang non-stop. She received over 700 interview requests, from national television to major newspapers to academic journals. Every producer wanted to know what Devin planned next. The boy who solved Olympiad equations in silence had now become the face of something bigger than math. But the first time Camille mentioned the media to Devin, he shook his head. "I'm not ready to talk," he said. "You don't have to explain yourself," she replied. But Devin wasn't finished. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I'm not avoiding it. I'm planning something else first. The twist came 3 days later. Devin declined every interview. Instead, he contacted Mr. Lattimore, asked for permission to return to Rutherford High, not as a student, but as a guest speaker in his old math classroom. The request was granted without hesitation. No press, no camera, just chalkboards and students. The room was full before the bell rang. Even students who had never met Devin filled the chairs, lining the walls, sitting on the floor. Mr. Lattimore introduced him simply. This is Devin Gaines. You know the story. But today he's not here to talk about courtrooms. He's here to talk about calculus. Devin stood at the board, heart pounding, then slowly began. There's something beautiful about a clean equation, he said. It doesn't care what you look like, or how much your dad earns, or what school you're in. It just wants truth. He drew a graph, explained the function, made them laugh once, made them think twice. For 40 minutes they listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Not to a hero, but to a student, one who refused to sit down. Afterward, Devin left quietly. No applause, no celebration, just a hallway of students who watched him walk by, knowing they'd seen more than a lesson. They'd seen a legacy being built in real time. Back at home, Devin received the final document, confirming the creation of the Devin Gaines Scholarship for underrepresented youth in mathematics. It would fund education, tutoring, and competition entry fees for Black and brown students across the state. Devin's reaction wasn't loud. He simply whispered, "That's the math that matters." The night before his first national interview set with a primetime anchor, Camille called to check in. "You ready?" Almost, Devin said. "What do you want people to know?" He was silent for a moment.
Then answered,
"That I was always here. They just didn't look." She smiled. "They're looking now." But Devin didn't show up for that first interview. He sent a message to the studio instead. "I'll speak," it read. "But not yet. First, I need to visit someone." Camille opened her laptop puzzled. "Who?" she whispered aloud. Then she looked at her phone and saw the contact Devin had called that morning. It was a name not mentioned since the trial began. A person no one expected him to seek. But Devin refused the first interview offer. He had something else planned first. The boy they ignored rewrote more than answers. He rewrote the future. Devin Gaines disappeared from the spotlight on purpose. In the weeks after the verdict, as networks called, podcasts offered exclusives, and even Ivy League recruiters reached out with praise, disguised as opportunity, he went silent. He wasn't hiding. He was recalculating. Fame had never been his variable. Impact was. So instead of sitting on morning shows or posing for magazine covers, Devin asked Camille to help him file paperwork for a nonprofit, one that wouldn't carry his name, but his purpose. He called it Open Arc, a free online learning platform for marginalized students, who like him were too often invisible inside classrooms, built to favor the familiar. It launched on a rainy Tuesday. No press release, no headline, just a tweet from Camille. "The kid who solved silence just launched a classroom no one can erase you from." Within 4 hours, the platform crashed from demand. By Friday, 12,000 students had signed up. Public libraries requested partnerships. Inner-city schools reached out for teacher guides. Parents sent handwritten letters thanking Devin for giving their children something no district had offered: access without permission. But Devin still wasn't done. He wanted to go back. Not to Rutherford High, to where it began. He asked Camille to schedule a visit to local elementary schools. No cameras, no press, just chalk dust and unfiltered curiosity. He wanted to see the faces of kids who still thought math wasn't meant for them. He walked into his first classroom carrying a whiteboard marker and a backpack that looked too small for him now. The teacher introduced him as a guest speaker, but when Devin began sketching numbers and stories across the board, the room didn't see a speaker. They saw something else: a translator, a liberator, a boy who could make a difficult equation feel like a riddle with a punchline, a boy who had once been told he wasn't welcome, and who now opened the door wider than anyone thought possible. At each school, he left the same message, written on the board before he left: talent doesn't have a zip code. At home, Ellis still cleaned the same hallways, still changed light bulbs and mopped cafeterias. But something had changed. Teachers no longer ignored him. They greeted him by name. They stopped to ask about Devin's next talk. One left a coffee on his cart with a sticky note: "Thank you for everything." Another passed him a flyer for a Black Student Excellence Fund, created in his son's name. He didn't say much, just smiled, then turned the corner and kept sweeping. The Math Olympiad returned the next semester, this time held at a larger venue due to national interest. Devin was invited, not as a contestant, but as the keynote speaker. He nearly declined. Camille convinced him otherwise. "You didn't just solve a problem," she said. "You redefined who gets to." So on a stage framed by school banners, in front of hundreds of polished students, teachers, and national press, Devin stepped up to the microphone. He wore a plain gray button-down and jeans. No medals. No fanfare. Just clarity. He looked out across the room and said,
I used to think talent lived in libraries, or in private tutors, or in the houses I'd clean with my dad. But talent doesn't have a zip code. It doesn't care about your clothes, or your parents' jobs, or what room they seat you in.
Talent just needs someone to stop pretending it isn't there. The applause didn't start immediately. It started slow, then rolled into a thunderous wave. Some stood, some cried, all watched. Because Devin wasn't just a story now. He was a mirror, a measure of how many others had been erased before him, and how many could be written back in. Camille, seated in the front row, watched with quiet pride. Beside her, Ellis sat awkwardly in a pressed shirt and borrowed blazer, his hands clasped in his lap. When the speech ended, Ellis leaned in and whispered, "You think this changes things?" Camille smiled. "It already has." And she was right. Because of Devin's case, a bill titled the Equal Pathways Act passed through the state legislature, mandating transparency in academic opportunity outreach and strict auditing of racially skewed admission practices in public schools. Camille had helped draft it. Devin's story was cited in every session, not as a headline, but as precedent. Back in the crowd, a little girl named Amari sat on the floor, her legs crossed beneath her, a math library book clutched tightly to her chest. She was only 8, but she'd watched the trial on her grandmother's old laptop. She'd seen Devin on the news. And now she was here, staring up at him like he wasn't just a speaker. He was a superhero. He didn't wear a cape. He wore confidence stitched from years of being ignored. When the Olympiad ended, Amari didn't rush for autographs like the other kids. She just stepped forward quietly and said, "I solved the triangle 1." Before they said the answer, Devin knelt down beside her, took her book, opened to the page, checked her math, and smiled. "You didn't solve it," he said. "You owned it." Then handed the book back. Amari beamed so brightly that the teacher watching from the side had to look away just to hold it in. That night, as the crowd faded and lights dimmed, Camille, Ellis, and Devin sat on the steps outside the venue. No interviews, no flashbulbs, just 3 chairs and a soft breeze. Ellis pulled out a folded piece of paper, one of the old hate letters, the one he hadn't shredded. He passed it to Devin. Devin read it, then looked at his father. "You kept this?" Ellis nodded. "You should burn it now." Devin said. Ellis didn't move. Camille took it gently, unfolded it, and read the final line. "You'll never be more than what we allow." She looked at Devin. "And yet, here you are." He chuckled, then stood. "They can keep their permission," he said. "I already wrote my own equation." The boy they erased became the proof no one could ignore. If you've ever been told you're not enough because of where you're from or how you look, remember Devin. They tried to silence him, erase him, punish him for being brilliant. But truth doesn't shrink. It rises. Type yes if you believe every child deserves to be seen. Subscribe if this broke your heart.